Let's get right to it. The Spence Crawford fight was billed as the biggest fight in the last 40 years, since Leonard Hearns, which happened in 1981. However, the harsh reality is that the revenue numbers did not live up to the billing. As a matter of fact, it wasn't even the biggest fight this year. Okay, yes, Spence versus Crawford was the biggest fight in the last 40 years on paper. However, Davis versus Garcia, that's King Ryan Garcia versus Gervonta Tank Davis, has been the biggest revenue generating fight this year. Why is that? Let's look at the numbers. For the Davis Garcia fight, the ticket revenue was $22.8 million. For the Spence Crawford fight, the ticket revenue was $21 million. Not much of a difference there. However, moving to the pay-per-view revenue, that's where the major difference comes in. First of all, Davis versus Garcia had over 1.2 million pay-per-view buys, and the Spence Crawford fight had around 650,000 pay-per-view buys. The pay-per-view revenue for the Davis Garcia fight, over $100 million. The pay-per-view revenue for the Spence Crawford fight, over $55 million. So the Davis versus Garcia fight almost doubled the Crawford Spence fight in revenue. Why is this? Why is this happening if the Crawford Spence fight was billed as the biggest fight since Hearns Leonard? Well, first let's look at Davis. He's considered by many now as the face of boxing. He has headlined over 5 pay-per-view fights, and he came and established himself in the pay-per-view ranks by opening up his first headlining pay-per-view back in 2020, in October of 2020, against a well-known Mexican fighter, Leo Santa Cruz, who was a star and is a star Mexican boxer and former champion. And then he fought an undefeated champion by moving up in weight to super lightweight and fighting the undefeated champion, WBA champion, Mario Barrios, and defeated him by TKO in the 11th round. Then he had a unanimous decision against Isaac Pitbull Cruz. Then he fought the undefeated Rolando Rolly Romero and defeated him in the 6th round by one-punch knockout. Then he fought the undefeated Hector Garcia, who was the 130-pound champion, undefeated. He beat him by TKO. And then he fought the King Ryan Garcia, who was undefeated. And he delivered in spectacular fashion in that fight. So he billed himself as a top pay-per-view headlining fighter, but he's delivering in these pay-per-view fights spectacularly. Outside of the Isaac Cruz fight, the rest were knockouts, and he delivered a good performance. And that Garcia versus Davis fight, talking about Ryan Garcia versus Gervonta Tank Davis, made the top 10 boxing pay-per-view fights of all time. Think over that. How is that possible? Why did that happen? Neither one of them had major belts at 135. Ryan has never had a major belt, so how is this possible? Before the Davis-Garcia fight, neither were on most pound for pound lists. It's because we're living in the age of social media. As compared to Spence Crawford, Davis and Garcia are rock stars on social media. They also have youth on their side. You don't necessarily have to be a youth to be a rock star on social media and have that translate into big time pay-per-view sales. You see Mayweather, he holds the top records. And you see his social media status. And then we move to Mike Tyson, who was a retired fighter and has an exhibition fight that made the top 10 pay-per-view fights of all time. But he has a strong social media presence. But what made the Davis-Garcia fight reach top 10 pay-per-view of all times? I've already mentioned how Davis built his pay-per-view following. And they also have youth on their sides. They also have a social media presence. But another thing that helps with it, the success of that fight, is you're dealing with nationality. This is something I believe Floyd Money Mayweather understands, garners a lot of anticipation, a lot of intensity, a lot of people interested in the fight. When you can bring nationality in it, especially when you're dealing with the Mexican Americans as well as the Black American fighters. These fighters, I believe, hold the biggest fan bases in boxing in America. The Mexican American boxing fan and the Black American boxing fan are arguably the two biggest fan bases in America. And when you have that and you have these two nationalities facing each other, then you bring in race. Race is a controversial thing. This is a thing that helps to garner interest. You have nationality involved. You have race pride involved. And these tend to make for the biggest revenue generating fights when you can pit two different nationalities against each other, especially when these nationalities have a large boxing fan base. And see, something that Floyd did that he, I believe, influenced Gervonta to do, and that is he placated the Mexican fan base by wearing Mexican style garb, right? Had the hat, the robe with the colors of Mexico. He did this to placate the fans, and a lot of the fans, he softened them to him so he can eventually garner a lot of fans from the Mexican side. And that's what I believe he did. And that's what I believe helps him to be the face of boxing. Think about it. His pay-per-view fights here, he's mainly fighting Mexican fighters. And by doing that, he understands, or at least his promotion understands, that will help him generate revenue. That's what it is, folks. The biggest fight this year was Davis versus Garcia. Like, comment, and subscribe. Give me your opinion on it. I would definitely like to know your thoughts. Talk to you next time.